Hi, everyone. My name is Ahmad Ashrafi, and I'm extremely excited to have a very special guest with us today, Eric Malka, someone that I'm sure you've heard about, but I think when you see the man behind what he's done, we're going to be even more impressed. So welcome, Eric.
Pressure is on now
Yeah,
with
I
this
don't think
intro.
so. I don't think so. You right before we started, you said, "I'm always ready." So tell us about this
Ready, man.
mentality. How's it going? And how did you get to where you are?
I'm being man, so I have to be ready and I have to make sure I deliver. Otherwise, I stink. You're right.
I love this
So,
mentality of you have to be in a go mode. So tell us a little bit about our story, about your story, how you got to where you are, and why you did what you did.
well, I quit college. I was about 17, had no prospects, had no money. I hated where I lived in Canada, and I decided to sell a few belongings and buy a Greyhound bus to New York City in 1985. I arrived at Port Authority with $100 in my pocket, no green card, called people like us illegal aliens back then. 24 years later, I sold my company to Procter& and Gamble and Gillette. And that's really my story. Today, I'm focused on helping the underdog entrepreneurs out there increase their odds of succeeding in this world of that we live in, right? So strategic brand investment, invest in early stage companies. I also do coaching of entrepreneurs. It's really where my passion lies right now is to help the underdog. For some reason, I was able to thread the needle in my career and achieve what I did against all odds. So what can we learn from, you know, what I did and what I avoid not doing to help the next generation of entrepreneurs increase their odds, basically.
That's wonderful, and I think we are at a very politically charged time about, especially this point about immigration, and you mentioning you were an illegal alien and an underdog. How did you? What what motivated you the most? I understand that maybe there was a pit bull behind you running towards if you don't succeed, you fail miserably. But what could you tell future entrepreneurs or about this subject of people feeling crushed by a system? How should they think about it?
Well, I didn't just decide to move to New York from another country. My family moved from Morocco to Canada when I was 9 years old. And I think that desensitized me to the notion that, it's impossible to change your life. I'm very passionate about immigration. Obviously, I don't feel like I belong to any one country. Therefore, America was a safe haven for me, especially New York, where, no one's from here. We're all immigrants. Therefore, I belong here. So, I hope I was a good addition to America. I employed hundreds of people and I've created, a contribution to the economy, paid my fair share of taxes. And, I think immigration needs to be controlled, but at the same time, it needs to be embraced.
I love it how you haven't lost your Moroccan French accent, even though you moved early on to Canada. How did you start with the art of shaving? What was the pivotal moment that you said, where did you see the gap?
So it wasn't a brilliant story like that. I mean, I wasn't, you know, seeing a vision in my sleep, but the artistry was my fourth business. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you this, my first two were successful. My third one wiped me out. And the art of shaving, my fourth business, started because I got involved with the industry. I had to get a job. I was broke. And I was introduced to men's grooming through my job. At the same time, my wife was playing around with natural ingredients and had a spa background. And as I traveled to London for my job, I noticed a bunch of stores that were selling luxury men's grooming and doing shaves and haircuts in Mayfair area of London. And I thought, hey, this is something that doesn't exist in the US. They would do well in New York. My wife and I want to start a small business. I can get product from my job, so we sold our car for $12,000. Naive in our 20s. We thought we could open a store in Manhattan with under $15,000. And being young has its advantages because when you truly believe something impossible can be done, you could achieve it. And A few months later, we opened a store on 62nd Street called The Art of Shaving. And, it was almost an instant hit within 6 months. We had been noticed by the New York Times, and the business just blew up. It was our way of going viral in the 90s. And we
That's wonderful. And I love how you said that most successful entrepreneurs, it's on their fourth or on their fifth attempt, that your first two were successful. Perhaps they didn't teach you the lessons that the third one did. And therefore the fourth one, and how did you overcome that? Because I think that after having going broke and then you seeing like, how did you get back on the horse? What was the thought
so
process?
listen, to me, mindset is everything. Mindset is really the key to being a successful person in life, and I have a growth mindset. I'm a very positive guy. I'm always action driven. And frankly, after I failed in my third business, I was a little traumatized. My aspiration as an entrepreneur were huge, and I had just failed miserably at starting a business. So I was broke. I don't have any rich uncles or parents to fund my next venture. I was lucky. My wife and I were very much in tune with the same goals. She wanted to start a business. She was an entrepreneur at heart. And even if I was a little gun shy, she talked me into starting this little store on 62nd Street, which, you don't have to twist my arm. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. You don't have to twist my arm. I'm like, listen, I can sell my car. We can sell our car. We maybe get 12 grand out of it. Let's figure it out. Let's open a store. I can get products from my job. My boss was nice enough to give me consignment on products. I didn't have to pay for them initially. And I think we didn't think much. We didn't think much. People tell me, oh, it was a great idea. It wasn't a great idea. It was a common idea that we stumbled upon and we executed it extremely well. That's really the key. The execution is everything. And our mindset, we were young. We were like, people tell me also I took a risk. I'm like, what? I had $12,000 to my name. How risky is that? I would have blown that on a weekend in Vegas. That's not a risk. I took risks later on in my career. Even today, I take more risks than I did back then, because when you have nothing to lose, you're not taking any risk. At least that's the way I saw it. And then we had good instincts. We got lucky. We very lucky, very, very lucky. And part of my luck was to use my weaknesses to my advantage. So not having a lot of resources and bootstrapping my business allowed me to take it slowly in the beginning. And that really allowed us to create a foundation that we could really build on.
Wow. And did you grow this business with your wife?
Yes, for the first 6 months, I kept my day job. But after the New York Times article in March 1997, the business blew up. We were doing every day what we were doing in a month prior. So I quit my job and I dedicated my entire focus on this thing that seemed to have life. I'm like, when we first started, we didn't have this business plan of doing this and that. We were just hoping for the best and, preparing for the worst. And when I saw that it was really something that people were really interested in and consumers loved and the press was attracted to, I dedicated all my time to it. And then it was off to the races. Now, this was my vehicle to get to where I wanted to go. So shaving is not a passion of mine, obviously, as you can tell. And that's okay. I was passionate about how I executed with my wife the idea of the shaving concept. We were passionate about people, consumers, employees, vendors. We had great relationships. We were passionate about luxury and packaging and aesthetics and quality. So everything we did was top shelf. And then we were very passionate about natural health and natural ingredients. So we brought that into the business as well. And this is what I became passionate about, how we executed the idea. And a lot of people put too much effort into the idea, not enough into the execution. And that's one of the messages I put out there. It's slow down, do it right, pick an idea and do it well.
Well, you're dropping knowledge left and right, and I think that gathering so much there. I do want to ask about the husband-wife dynamic, because it's something I believe a little bit taboo when husbands and wives work together. They're like, some people go as far as saying that if we work together, we would kill each other. But I believe I'm on the other camp. I believe that if you have a good relationship at home, it's really a couple dynamic, what would you say what are those like principles that you live by, and maybe share an experience of
So the
something that you
first
shouldn't do?
principle, yeah, you shouldn't work with your spouse. I mean, that's my go-to advice, unless it's the ideal partner, right? Um, the same thing applies to working with your spouse as it would be to work with anyone else as a business partner. They should have very complementary skills. They should have the same values and vision as you do, and there should be, clear a clear structure about whose lane each one of you are on. And my wife and I instinctively were perfect partners from the very get go. We talked about. I think we started talking about opening a business on our second date. It was just a natural thing. And she was 20 when I met her. She was the cutest thing I've ever seen, but she turned out to be a brilliant brand builder and green formulator. So that was lucky. And, we had to adjust to working together. Now, I'm going to tell you, when any partnerships, when things go bad, it's bad for the partnership. When the business is not good, the partnership is going to suffer. We were lucky that things went well. And, she was a, a formidable partner in creative side of the business, and I was her match in the strategic side of the business. So it was really, and then we enjoyed this success together. We traveled together on business, we worked together, we went through this experience as a couple, and I think that made us richer for it. And since then, we've been creating magic together, whether it's having awesome kids or building a beautiful life or businesses, or now BI, our strategic brand investment VC fund, we're doing together as well. So, if you're just looking for an employee, your spouse is probably not the right place to look. But if you have incredible talents that can be combined to succeed, there's a lot of books out there about what to do and not to do. I'm not going to bore you with some of the details. They're pretty obvious. Not taking work home and home to work is not always easy, but it's good. That's all I can tell you about this. For us, it worked out.
Fantastic. No, and I think it's definitely admirable. And more that I do this podcast and I meet very incredible entrepreneurs, their support system or their house system doesn't necessarily have to be that their partner is in the business
That's right.
actively. It's also a support system out of the business. And
100%.
that makes or breaks sometimes.
We waited 14 years to have kids. We knew we wanted to have kids, but as I explained to people, because both parents were all into the business, we had to neglect either the kids or the business if we had children. When you have a spouse, whether it's the man or the woman that handles the kids and the home, then you're free to go all in with the business. In our case, we were both in it. So we waited until basically we sold the business to have children, but we made that as a conscious decision. So you're touching on something very important.
Sure. And also, like the word you just used, consciousness, it's not really going through the motions recklessly. Perhaps that consciousness provides more structure and less friction.
It does. And for me, it came from, my dad, who passed away recently, was not around. Thank you. It was not around for me really as a daddy when I was growing up. So I definitely did not want to be that for my kids, and I wanted to be available. And I was extremely lucky to retire when I was 40 and have a child at 41, and be all in for that, for their formative years.
Yeah. And you mentioned that too many entrepreneurs are focused on the perfect idea and not enough on the execution. What other problems do you feel that entrepreneurs today are making? What mistakes are they making today?
I think the biggest mistake I see is they're running too fast right away. I don't know. I was a runner and I trained for a marathon. And what you learn is to pace yourself. If you want to finish the race and you want to win the race, you got to start pacing yourself from the beginning. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that are just trying to scale way too fast when they're not ready. And they're, and you pay the price for that. So I think that's the message we've been getting for the past 10 years with thought leaders and seeing extraordinary human beings succeed, right? We have 5 to 10 extraordinary entrepreneurs in our lifetime that have changed the world, but they're just they're just one in a billion, right? So they're not a model for most people. I want to be a thought leader that changes that conversation and to be relatable, be, this ordinary guy that really had everything stacked against them was able to have an extraordinary journey. And what was that about? And it was really about going long. If you want to be successful, you got to give yourself 20 years. If you do it before, great. But, those 5-year business plans that get you to the moon and back, I'm skeptical about that. It happens. It happens. I've seen meteoric growth, but, on average, everyone that's successful will tell you that it takes time.
Yeah.
So pace yourself, man. Think big, think huge, but start small. It's one of the principles I talk about in my book is crawl, walk, run, and then fly. And if you try to skip any of those stages, that's recipe for disaster. The other thing I see a lot of is, there's a couple of issues. One is for many entrepreneurs, sales is one of the functions of the company. And to me, it was the only function of the company. On day one, it was selling, selling, selling. I needed a coach to pull me back a little bit and be like, you need operations to support that, right? So I was so obsessed with customers and sales. I think building a sales and marketing organization is key. I don't care what you do, whether you're a plumber or you have a luxury shaving brand. That's just a reason to exist. Once you figured out your offering, your value proposition, everything is about selling and marketing from that point on. And if you're not doing that, you're going to have a problem. And the way to really scale a company is to have a business model in place that's firm. And a lot of entrepreneurs I meet either don't understand what it is to have a business model or they are trying to scale without having one. And, a business model is a very simple thing, which is hard to get. It's a proven process to acquire and retain customers. It's a machine that does that. And if you figure out your machine, you can start making it go faster and faster and bigger. But until then, it's hard to scale a company when the foundation is weak. And that could also, be a house of cards.
Yeah. Very, very profound stuff. Especially I liked entrepreneurs trying to scale too fast. I think it's everybody wants to be the next Uber, the next that story of huge scale J curve, money pouring startup, but really it's a recipe to, like you said, the odds are not in your favor, and then it's also could be a recipe for failure if you don't have a proper business plan. I also think that people try to put too much pressure on themselves on cost basis. Like they start way too expensive, so then they have to grow in order to live. But that have to grow in order to live also means you're not thinking of your business plan or what you mentioned, the machine. You're just kind of chasing your costs. That could be like a outside pressure that really is making you run like a chicken, but not really going anywhere.
Yeah. If you need to increase sales to resolve all your problems, you know, that's a problem. That's a red flag right there. Something else is wrong. Of course, if you were able to increase your sales by 30% overnight, it might resolve a lot of problems, but that just doesn't happen. And that mindset might actually help you make things worse over time. I
Yeah.
agree.
I want to move on to, you just mentioned a red flag, but I know that now you're looking at venture as an investment, and you went from being an entrepreneur to being an investor. I went through the similar transition and had a bit of a identity crisis. Did you feel that too? How was that transition for you?
Well, I had to go back to school, man. I had to go back to school, basically rewire the brain and learn all those skills because you can use a lot of entrepreneurial elements to be a great investor, but it's very two different techniques at work, right? So I went back to school, read as much as I could. I went to university, took courses, learned from some of the best out there, and then practiced and learned and made mistakes. And again, it comes down to mindset in many ways, whereas as an entrepreneur, we're running up to the short term. We're always hustling, but as an investor, you need to really work with your brain and slow down and be patient. It's a patience game, and you got to work on your emotional system, right? If you're not disciplined, if you're not cool, you're gonna make some mistakes. So yeah, it was a transition for sure, and I'm transitioning again now as a venture capital investor. That looking at businesses and knowing the statistics of success versus failures puts even more pressure for me to find that needle in a haystack. The way we try to minimize risk as a VC is by being more strategic than financial, right? The money is not the big piece we bring to the deals. It's really our expertise, our guidance. We want to be on your shoulder for the next 5, 7 years to help you navigate. We're picking guys that know how to do what they do best. But if they make a lot of mistakes along the way, they're not going to take advantage of their business savviness, right? So my job is really to guide them, to open doors, and to bring expertise and experience to the table to hopefully minimize the amounts of mistake. I don't know if you're a tennis player, but I always use the analogy that the championships are won by guys that make the least unforced errors. It's not the winners. It's not the aces. It's not the games you win. It's the guy with the least unforced errors wins the gold.
Yes. I love what you just said. I actually, once I transitioned from entrepreneur to investor, I started helping other entrepreneurs invest. And I found exactly that good entrepreneurs are not necessarily good investors because they want to put their hands in the cookie jar a little bit too often and try to, or get into the kitchen and try to help. But really, investing is what you just mentioned about patience and trying to be hands off. And really what you just mentioned about your VC strategy is not, the money isn't the lever on your philosophy or your thesis. The lever is really the knowledge that you bring behind and how you've been successful in one industry, and then that could be replicated by, really, investment is about access. Who can you open doors with? Who can you bring to the table? And then the mindset portion, which I think is so important. I completely agree with you. And I love that you use the tennis analogy because I try to be a professional tennis player when I was younger. And I always say that if I had today's mind back then, I would have
That's
gone a
right.
lot farther. And what I noticed, you're right, it's the one that makes the less unforced errors, but it's also the one that may put the ball in one more time.
One more time. That's right.
So it's,
And
go ahead.
where we play is entrepreneurs that have proven their concept. They've brought it to market and they've proven market fit, but they haven't raised serious capital yet. That's our sweet spot. And a lot of
Interesting.
entrepreneurs cannot bridge that gap because they make too many mistakes. And my job is to come in, see the potential, and to pave the way to make them an investable business. You shouldn't have a hard time finding investors because you're bringing something delicious to the table. So that's where we play. We're below the Series A round. We want to get our portfolio brands to that Series A, basically.
How
We're
did you
doing that now.
find, how did you narrow down that position? Because in the world of investing, you can do anything, but then this is like a very
Yeah.
subset of a subset of a subset. How did you get there?
I got there by identifying my purpose, my why. And my why is to really focus on the underserved entrepreneurs, the ones that don't have access to those Series A brains and never get there. And that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about helping those underdogs. So also I can't write $2, $3 million checks for transaction. I can't compete with those VCs at that level, but I can write a $250,000 check and open the doors to 40 or 50 VCs in our industry that I'm in connections with to invest on the Series A. And sometimes we invest alongside them. We'll put 10% of the money. But having access to that capital and giving them the confidence that we help that business get there and we're going to kind of, support them in their future success helps us to go through that process. Our hope is to maybe even, bring investors behind us to sponsor these deals and eventually maybe even to raise a fund to do that. But, right now I'm in my happy place because I have no partners except my wife and no investors, So I don't know if I'm going to bridge the gap eventually because if this continues to be a very enjoyable and fruitful endeavor, I might keep it the way it is right now.
For sure.
But my mission is very simple, empowering tomorrow's entrepreneurs. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm doing podcasts. That's why I speak in front of, students and entrepreneur groups and invest behind these businesses. I mean, that's really my entire why as I head into the sunset of my career, right?
Love it. How I'm sure now that you're publicly talking about your why, you're encouraging people to be an entrepreneur, and you must be inundated with deal flow. How do you filter? How do you see? How do you not miss that needle in the haystack? Because you might not even know it's a needle.
Look, unless you're in my network, unless you're somebody that is in my world somehow. How many people have seen those deals before I did, right? I'm not your first go-to guy. A lot of smart people have said no to it. It's really about creating opportunities. I've always believed that nothing comes to you. Opportunities are created as entrepreneurs. That's the mindset of an entrepreneur that I bring as an investor.
Sure.
A lot of the deals that I do are things that I see. I see an opportunity with a brand or with people or with the sector, and I go after it. So it's more about that. And I'm very careful about who I preserve my lifestyle more than anything else. And for me to be in bed with the wrong people would be, not fun. So I vet the people as much as the business that they're in. There needs to be a fit on all fronts. But a lot of these, I stay in a very narrow lane as well. I'm not agnostic. I'm very, very narrow. I like businesses that are in beauty, grooming, or wellness that are promoting natural and environmental health as much as possible, that are certain size, that are branded. I don't invest in companies. I invest in brands or things that can become a brand. So another thing disciplined investors do are creating a very, very niche lane for themselves. And I try to be a big fish in a small pond in that world.
Yeah, I actually really align with your criteria that you create as an entrepreneur. You create opportunity, but as an investor, you should also create opportunity. And we call it the hunting ground
Mhm.
because the it's not the VC model. Perhaps is more like let's warehouse, and I see that more like farmer gatherer. And when you are a lone wolf or more like an investor or an active investor, an alpha investor, what I call is the guy that actually looks for the one that has the deal that has a little bit of hair on it, that has a little bit of problems, but solving those problems catalyzes that to a very big
100%.
opportunity. So completely aligned with you in that sense. Let's talk about failure. No, I don't think I saw yesterday your post about ingredients. How do you see failure now? Because I think that you said at the beginning, you didn't risk anything. $12,000 on selling your car, start a business, works out,
Well,
doesn't work out, you can start up again. But now, what is that mentality like?
I never invest in anything, any amount of money that I wouldn't be okay losing, right? That I'm going to be fine. I invested quite a bit of money in that project. It was a passion project. I see that we've made some real mistakes with that project, and I've learned so much from my mistakes that I'm teaching in my book and to entrepreneurs every day. I mean, that was really a godsend for me to have that experience because I've learned so much from succeeding with the art of shaving, but I also learned so much about the mistakes that I can make. As a successful entrepreneur, you have to be very careful. Having a lot of resources can make you make mistakes. So, um, I don't beat myself up about ingredients. It was a beautiful project. It was a brand that was revered by the industry and that really broke some grounds, very innovative. I think at the end, what we realized, my wife and I, is that if you put Michael Jordan back on the court, he gets killed. He may have been the greatest player of all time, but that's not where he belongs. He belongs in the owner's box, the coaching box, and the mentorship box. He doesn't belong on the court, you know. And my wife and I fooled ourselves in thinking that we belonged on the court again. And we don't have the time, we don't have the bandwidth, and we don't have the hustle to build a startup. So we wanted to incubate this brand. It was kind of a dream of ours to bring this brand to life. But then we realized, we're not the right people for it. And then we tried to look for partners to take it over. And after 3 failed negotiations, we realized that we don't really want a partner. So the next best thing is to shut it down for now. We have all the IP, we have the trademarks and the formulation in hand. We don't have investors or partners, so we're shelving it. We're seeing how we can bring it back to life one day in another capacity. But we're clear that we don't want to be operators. We don't want to be. We don't have. We're not. I don't have a plan B right now. I have an incredible life, and I have a passion project of investing in entrepreneurs. So, my motivation is not there to build another startup, even though I'm very passionate about the brand and about its ethos and about its mission. I'm just not psyched about operating.
Well, I think what you said is incredible because so many entrepreneurs that sell their business start a new one and then this happens and then they don't realize what you just realized. And I think it'll help a lot of people that exit that it's time to do something else. Maybe not go back to the court, but you belong close to the game, but not perhaps doing the same thing that you did before.
Everybody's different, and I always start coaching people with the question, what do you want? And if you love the game, I mean, go play, there are leagues for, 40 and 50. But in my case, I always had a dream of being an investor. I always had a dream of being a VC. So, that was my dream, right?
Yeah. And then one of the traits that is commonly known for entrepreneurs is like you need to have perseverance. And if you don't persevere, you have to go to the end of the world. How did you find the grace of saying, okay, we do need to shut this down? Because it's like, I wouldn't say it's anti-perseverant, but it could be seen like anti-entrepreneurial to shut it down. But actually it's a very courageous move. What would you say to people that need to throw the towel, or say like not even throw the towel, but say like, hey, this is not working. We need to pivot.
When I was younger, I wasn't the smartest or most educated, but I was really the most resilient motherfucker out there. Nothing was going to stop me. You know, you give me a couple of stones and I turn into something, right? But those days are different now. For me, I've learned when you become free, you know, real freedom in your life, freedom to choose, then you have the freedom to say yes and no to things. And if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. When I said yes to ingredients for a year and a half, I said no to a lot of things I'm passionate about, including building my VC fund, my lifestyle, my social life, my travel. Everything went out the window, and I started getting stressed again about inventory and this and that. And I said yes to ingredients. I said no to so many other things. And then when I realized that, I said, I need to say no to this so I can say yes to what I really want.
Well, very, very, very good and profound. And I think that it's the opposite also works. Saying no to opportunity also means saying yes to the thing that you want to do and what you're passionate about. What
Yeah.
about diversification? What do you see in that realm? Like, okay, you have a sale and exit. How do you see most people think? And this is what I love about this podcast is uncovering things that most people think and then really changing their views or seeing another perspective. Most people say you sell your business, you diversify. What is your thoughts on diversifying and versus concentrating?
Very, I mean, diversification means low risk. Concentration means high reward, high risk, right? So you need to make choices as an entrepreneur. You need to have a business plan. You need to have, for me, I was very careful. I was very careful with two concepts, having enough and wanting more. Which camp are you in? In my head, I had enough. I had plenty. Can you have more? You can never be too good looking, too rich, there's a lot of elements like that. But in my case, when I sold my business, I knew that I had enough. I had enough. I was getting off the rat race. I was getting off the hamster wheel. That was my choice. I could have wanted to double, triple, turn 10 into 100 and so forth and keep on going. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not judging people that decide to go crazy. I mean, I have incredible admiration for a guy like Elon Musk who made $1 billion and risked it all to build Tesla. You're not going to get there if you don't take incredible risks. And that's being concentrated. You're not going to create huge wealth without concentration, right? I'm happy with my 10% return on my assets every year. I'm not looking for 30, 40, 50% returns that require me to take extremely high risk and potentially, a lot of work. So I'm lucky enough that I have enough assets to be able to support my lifestyle and, use a portion of those assets as play money. This is play money for me. What I'm doing with SBI is play money. It's what I do for fun. My 3 F's are fulfillment, actually, lucrative, right? And the third one is not the most important. That's the third one for a reason. So that's what I do with 10, 15% of my assets is I invest and I have fun and it's my occupation. I'm never going to retire, but I am very diversified with the 85, 90% of my assets, which allow me a great lifestyle, freedom, the ability to do whatever I want with the rest of my time because that's all passive.
Fantastic. What about your kids? How do you teach them to do this? Maybe this is because you definitely have a unique position in life and a very lucky one. How do you instill that? What do you teach your kids? Is this the life you want to for them? How do you impart values or what do you and your wife think about this point?
I'm not going to speak for my wife because, everybody has different values. Listen, it's complicated. I believe, raising kids is a crapshoot, right? You could do it all wrong and they turn out good. You could do it all right. They turn out bad. My two boys are polar opposites. It couldn't be more different in every aspect. So how do I be the same parent to two completely different human beings and they turn out okay? I think there's a lot of pre-wiring. There's nature versus nurture. I heard someone say, to be a great father, you need to love them, be around, and be a good example. I mean, that's basically all we control is what they see is what they get. For me, if my kids are healthy, they're safe, I've done 90% of my job as a parent, right? I don't spoil them. Again, we're talking about yes and no. Spoiling them is not about privilege. Spoiling kids is about yes and no. You can be poor or rich. They can be spoiled because you're always giving into their wants and needs, right? It's always yes, 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 yes. I think that's the recipe for spoiling kids. I realize my kids are privileged, but I think that can work against them as well because, they're used to a certain lifestyle. My youngest is on a school trip right now and he's staying in a reasonable hotel, probably 3-star hotel. He probably thinks it's like a prison because he's used to better accommodation. But I tell him, listen, if you want to keep this up in your life, you're going to have to work hard. It's not easy. I'm not going to give parenting advice. It's a delicate balance. But if I can be a good example to my kids and give them good value, my wife and I have dinner with our kids since they were born every night, unless, 1 or 2 nights a week, we go out one time together. So I think these are little things, not the big things we do, but even in business, in life, it's little things. Consistency is my superpower, by the way. very consistent. When I was running 500 miles a year as a runner, I was never running more than 2 miles a day. I just did it 250 times a year. None of the people I know ran 500 miles because, and they bragged about 10-mile run and 12-mile run. But at the end of the day, I ran a lot more than any of them because I was the most consistent guy. And as a father, I try to be that consistent guy that shows up and that shows a consistent, having dinner every night as a family. Even if it's 10 minutes and you're out, you're sitting down, breaking bread. And these are the things I try to do. And then the rest, I'm like, pray to God, bro. Pray to God. Make sure they're safe and healthy, and everything else is gravy, man.
We are so alike. Actually, on my company values, I put consistency is our superpower. You
That's good,
quoted
man. I haven't heard that many. Consistency is a superpower, man.
it is. It is. And I actually have a cool story. I was reading this morning this book called Effortless about the people who wanted to go to the South Pole. It was like the last frontier. There was an English team and then there was a Norwegian team. And the Norwegian team, when it was good weather, they went all out, maximum miles. And when it was bad weather, they would stay in. And then there was this English team would said, we're going to do 15 miles, good, rain or shine, whatever it is, 15 miles. And the English team got there 3 months before the Norwegian team. And
That's
it's just
good,
an
man.
example of consistency is a superpower, and then they were not tired at 15 miles. It was doable. And then the other guys were like doing 80-mile days, like to the bone. And then they were 3 months late.
Consistent.
So, inconsistent. Exactly.
You're
So
hitting all my favorite subjects, man.
love it. We should get together to play some tennis now that I know that you do some tennis as well.
Used to.
I used to too, so it will be fine. I'd like to end the podcast by asking what inspires you in your work today, and how do you want people to remember you?
What inspires me is really the entrepreneurs I work with. Watching them do what they do is very inspiring to me. It's humbling. And what was the second part of your question?
How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone that dedicated all his work to help entrepreneurs. That's the only thing I associate myself with as a label. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm very passionate about helping younger entrepreneurs. I wish I had someone like me when I was starting out. I was lucky that I made it, but I see so many smart people not get there. And I don't know how far I can take this, but I'd love to be remembered as someone that made a difference in a lot of entrepreneurs' lives.
Love that. And entrepreneurship is a tribe, so we're all tribesmen and we're all helping each other. So I really want to thank you for coming. This is loved having you over. This is a space that I want you back. Whenever you want to be back, you're more than welcome. I definitely enjoyed it. I do this podcast for selfish reasons because I get to meet incredible people like you and learn firsthand. But I know that our listeners are also gonna really enjoy this one. So thank you again for being here.
And I'll give you a compliment. I do a lot of podcasts. I'm doing 4 this week, and you do a good job. I think I'm as good as the person that I'm in front of as far as guest. So you're doing a great job in your podcast, asking the right questions and really getting the insights.
Appreciate that. I'm just getting started, so I really appreciate that comment.
Good up, man.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.